Okay, welcome back in. I hope you're doing well. We're doing something today that's a little bit different. You almost never see this in social media or on sports television. We're looking back a little bit today to January, February, and March when Kansas City had quite a number of their own free agents to make decisions on. Now, some of them, this group here, they decided to re-sign. We'll look at that group in a second. Some of them, they decided to either release or they were already free agents, and those people either have retired or have not re-signed with anybody else yet. And some of them, this group right here in the middle, Kansas City decided to let go or to not re-sign, and they've already re-signed with another team. Now, why that's important and why anybody would care to look back is it's important to look back at your decisions and see, financially, did we do the right thing here? And so we'll go through each group. And we'll go through most of these players. This isn't all the free agents that Kansas City had, but this is most of the important guys that they had to make decisions on. If I've left one out, I kind of got these from different places. If I've left one out, by all means, put it in the comments, somebody that was important enough to be talked about, and we'll address that in the future, okay? First of all, though, I want to look at these guys right here. These are the guys who were free agents, or Kansas City cut them, and then they came back. And all five of these guys were re-signed by Kansas City over the past couple of months. This is the cap number that they were making in 2020, and this right here is the cap number that they signed for this year. Mike Remmers is a guy who, at right tackle, right guard, he played a couple of different spots last year. It was worth every penny. You had him for $1.1 million last year. It was one of the, out of the guys who were not on a rookie contract last year, it was by far one of the best deals in the NFL. Kansas City did a huge deal to have him on the roster last year. Not every NFL team wanted him, as evidenced by this $1.1 million price tag. A lot of people didn't really even think that he was worth putting on an NFL roster. Kansas City did. He played huge for them all year long. He played so well that it was my advice, and of course they're not listening to me, but they had the same opinion, that he was very much worth bringing back, and he is. Now, it cost a little bit more, $3.3 million this year, but that is worth every penny to have him back. He may not even win the starting job at right tackle. I think he's struggling with a little bit of injury right now. I can't remember if it's a back injury or if it's something else, but even if he comes back, he may not win that starting job. It may be Lucas Niang. But I said this before, injuries are coming. They come to every NFL team. Of course, they're going to come to the offensive line. When they do, when somebody goes down, Remmers here, who can play several different spots, who's a veteran, who looked fantastic last year, he's there, he's ready to step in. And the price tag, $3.3 million, it's worth that extra couple of $1 million to have a guy like him there ready whenever somebody goes down. It's absolutely worth every penny to have him there on the roster, even as tight as Kansas City is. Daniel Sorensen is the same way, but the money went in reverse. Last year, he was making $4.8 million against the cap. That's about what he's been making the past 3 seasons for Kansas City. And he's been worth that. But Kansas City, he was a free agent this year. Kansas City gets him back for $2.5 million. And that's probably due to the COVID cap that a lot of teams are experiencing. But they get him for about half price of what they had him for last year. And so basically, the money they saved here on Daniel Sorensen, they used that for Mike Remmers, and the same thing here for Sorensen. If anybody goes down in that defensive backfield, particularly at the safety spots, Sorensen can step in and play. And listen, he doesn't have the athleticism to really be your full-time starter for multiple seasons, but when somebody goes down, he can immediately step in. He's smart. He knows the system. He knows the coaches. He knows the players. He understands how to play in the NFL. He's athletic enough to where he's not going to get embarrassed. He's not going to make rookie mistakes. This is a player who's talented enough to be on the NFL field, especially as your backup. And to have these two guys here, excuse me just a second, to have these two guys, Remmers and Sorensen, these are the first players to disappear for most teams when they're doing a lot of restructuring. Look at Philadelphia. Look at New Orleans. Look at Pittsburgh. They have decided, all 3 of those franchises over the past 2 seasons, they have decided that they've got 8 to 12 players that they simply cannot live without. They simply cannot win without those players. And so they're doing everything that they possibly can to keep the band together. They're pouring more and more money into that group of players. That group of players' salaries are going up and up and up. And even though they're getting restructured out every season, and that money's getting spread back around, there simply isn't enough money to get around for everybody. And so what happens is these players right here, these veteran guys who probably shouldn't be starting but are amazing backups, and when they come in, they're not going to embarrass you. They're not going to make the rookie mistakes that a draft pick from the 4th or 5th round is going to make. They probably have just as good of an athleticism as a 3rd or 4th round draft pick, certainly a 4th or 5th round draft pick. They come in, and their salary cap numbers are very low, and it is huge. It's huge in October, it's huge in November, it gets even bigger by the time you get to the playoffs, and you don't have any real sore spots for some of these teams to pick on that you go up against, because every team has it. Every team has these injuries, every team has these weaknesses, and you just don't want there to be a huge drop-off. And when one of those stars goes down, there's always going to be some kind of a drop-off, but when you have a guy like this and a guy like this waiting in the wings, next man up is more than just a catchphrase for a movie. It's a plan, okay? And this is the plan. And this is good work here by Kansas City to bring these two guys back for their units. Whether they win the starting job or not, personally, I hope Remmers doesn't win the starting job. I hope Lucas Niang wins it. He's the young guy. He's the guy for the future. And I'd rather have Remmers sitting back here all rested for when somebody does get injured and go down. Remmers can just step right in and play at any point, at any time, okay? The same thing with Sorensen. So excellent work here on both of those guys for Kansas City. Taco Carlton and Demarcus Robinson, both of them are guys that they bring back at $1.1 million. And I want to point this out real quick. On one of the last 2 videos that I did, I said that they could go out and sign a free agent for $750,000 or $900,000. I failed to mention in the last CBA, the NFL actually raised those minimum player salaries. So if a player could be signed last year for, say, $750,000, this year, depending on his situation, he could probably be in the $920,000 bracket. And guys last year who were making around $900,000, this year they'll probably be somewhere around the $1.1 million bracket. Okay, so I did want to correct that from the last couple of videos. Taco Carlton, again, this is not a starter. This is a guy who's going to pitch in 200, 300 snaps. He's athletic enough to play the position. Just get there in the rotation. Keeps guys fresh. Keeps the other guys fresh. Better probably, I think, than a free agent walking in off the street, especially a rookie free agent, especially from a talent level. I think Taco Carlton is an upgrade there. So that's important. Same thing with Robinson. Listen, Robinson's a guy who could start for a lot of teams. Now, he's not really the starter for Kansas City because they have so many talented guys who can catch the football, but he can be. This is a guy who could be probably the 3rd best starting wide receiver for a lot of teams in the NFL. Kansas City's got him for $1.1 million, okay? So excellent re-sign there by Kansas City. And then Okafor here is really the guy that I'm the most impressed with from a financial standpoint. You know, they brought Okafor in, I forget, 2 off seasons, 3 off seasons ago. It wasn't a large contract, but it was big enough to where that last year he was making $4.9 million, which really was too high. For his performance level, for his ability level, they were trying to get somebody a little bit bigger than what they had at defensive end, and he's been okay, but he's really not the kind of guy that you want to see get 600, 800 snaps a season. He's a rotation guy. He's the kind of guy you want to see maybe get 400 snaps a season, just pitch in, but he's not going to embarrass you. This is so important. Okafor is the kind of guy who, again, the experience is there. He's athletic enough to compete on the field with the kinds of guys he's going up against at right tackle, left tackle, or at tight end, or at running back. He's athletic enough to compete with those guys. He'll win some of those battles. He'll lose some of those battles. At $1.1 million, it's an excellent re-sign. They already had him on the roster at $2 million, decided to go ahead and cut him and let him go. No other NFL team was willing to offer enough money for him to move, so he comes back to Kansas City for $1.1 million. These kinds of players here, these are valuable players, and on the surface, it doesn't seem like it. You know, when you're looking at guys like Chris Jones and Tyrann Mathieu and Travis Kelce and when you're looking at Patrick Mahomes, when you're looking at the glory guys of the NFL, these guys kind of don't look that important, but they are, because Travis Kelce can't play left tackle, and Travis Kelce can't play running back, and Travis Kelce can't play defensive back. Okay, Travis Kelce plays one spot, and he plays it very well. But you've still got 24 starting positions in the NFL, and when those guys go down, or when those guys need a break, or when those guys need to be freshened up, you really have to have a solid 35, 40 players to go make it through an NFL season effectively. These are the guys, all right? These are the guys who step in and fill that gap versus a free agent off the street, or versus last year's fifth-round draft pick who's been a little disappointing. You fill in the blank. These guys are so important. So excellent re-signings here by Kansas City. They will pay off huge as the season goes along. I'm going to slide right over here to this other group very quickly. Anthony Sherman, Daniel Kilgore, both retired. Happy trails to both of them. Really enjoyed both of them in their careers, so they both had solid NFL careers. Martinez Rankin, the writing was kind of on the wall when Kansas City didn't want to play him in the regular season in spite of the injuries. They certainly didn't want to play him in the Super Bowl in spite of all the injuries. They played musical chairs with almost every position except for one for the Super Bowl in order to not play Martinez Rankin. So no surprise there that he's gone. He hasn't re-signed yet. Le'Veon Bell hasn't found the team yet. Played with Kansas City last year. Didn't get a lot out of him. And he kind of made a big deal about that a few weeks ago in the offseason. So Bell, we'll see if he gets with anybody. Osemele, listen, the legend of Osemele continues on. Listen, folks, he wasn't playing too well in his first 5 games last year. Now, was he still big and strong? Yes. Could he still pancake people? Yes. Was he still had a major work ethic? Yes. Was he still smart? Yes. But what he was missing was, and this is important for a guard, what he was missing was the agility and the flexibility. He just wasn't moving around good enough for Kansas City to have had a good offensive line with him last year. Could they have made it through? Yeah, they could have. Did they like his strength? Yeah, they loved it. What's not to love about that? But he just is an absolute shell, even before the knee injuries. Forget the knee injuries for a second. An absolute shell of the player that he was 3 years previous to last year, and just nothing like the player he used to be. Strength notwithstanding, he was not moving quickly enough, couldn't get to his spots, a lot of times couldn't get to the guy that he needed to get to even make the block. Those things are very important, especially in the running game. And Osemele just was not able to do that in the first 5 games last year. Kansas City was winning in spite of it because they have so much talent on the roster. They would have figured out a way. But Osemele, with the knee injuries this year, still does not have another team yet. We'll see if he finds a spot. Well, maybe that's it for him in the NFL. Austin Ryder was a guy who had some injury struggles last year when he was on the field and healthy. He played pretty well. When he was struggling with injuries, not playing too well, a lot of people thought that he might get a pretty decent contract this year. Chiefs let him go. I like what they have this year at center even better. They would not have gone wrong to have brought Ryder back, but for the money, it was smart to let him go. I thought he was going to make a lot more than what he's made so far. He's got some teams looking at him. I think the Bears and the Texans are looking at him. He made $3.8 million last year. I thought he would make more this year. He hasn't yet. We'll see what kind of a contract he gets. It may be just another one-year deal. In any case, Kansas City did the right thing by pulling Creed Humphrey out of the draft, and then by pulling Austin Blythe, who's can start, but will be a better backup. We'd love to see Creed Humphrey win that starting job, and I think he will. Mitchell Schwartz, of course, had the back trouble last year. I personally would not have let go of both Schwartz and Fisher in the same offseason. A little bit risky, but I give Kansas City a lot of credit for making the hard and smart financial choices that other NFL franchises just don't want to make. And they let go of both of these guys in the same offseason. I forget how much they saved, if it was $17, $18 million between the two of them. It was a lot of money. Mitchell Schwartz still has not signed with another NFL team, which leads me to believe that he's still having the back trouble they had all of last year for Kansas City. So those guys are still available, or most of them are injured, is why they're still available at this point. I want to finish up with this group right here, okay? Sammy Watkins. It has not been too long ago, folks. It's been 2 off seasons ago. Sammy Watkins had a cap hit that was somewhere in the neighborhood of $20.1 million. A massive cap hit, too much. When you look back at his career with Buffalo and with the Rams, he had potential, excellent potential. He had the potential to be one of the best wide receivers in football. Somewhere between the injuries and the inconsistency, he never lived up to that. He should not have been given a contract as large as he was given. This is one of the things I always like to look for when a player leaves your team and goes and signs somewhere else for a lot less money. It probably means you were paying him too much. Even under the COVID cap, probably paying him too much. The last year, 2020, his cap hit was $9 million. Probably still a little bit too much, all things considered, especially under the COVID cap. So I think the Ravens picked him up. I can't remember if it was the Ravens or not. But anyway, 1 year, $5 million he signed for this year. So Kansas City made the right decision to let him go, not to try to re-sign him, and that was an expected decision for the most part. Eric Fisher here would have been making $15.2 million this season. And again, I would not have let go of Fisher and Schwartz. Where would you have gotten the extra money? I wouldn't have restructured. There's probably a couple of guys that I wouldn't have signed as free agents for Kansas City, be that as it may. He signs for 1 year, $8.4 million. Now, we said this. Nobody else was saying this at the time, okay? All the articles, all the videos that were out at the time kept saying that Fisher was probably going to miss this entire season. I did the Achilles video. I gave the reasons why I thought that Eric Fisher would not be gone most of this season. I said I figured he would probably come back in late September. Wouldn't be surprised if he was back for the start of the season, but would probably miss the start and would probably be back for late September, early October. That is the timeline that we've been hearing from the Colts, and the Colts would not have signed him to a 1 year, $8 million deal if they didn't think he was going to be ready. Now, there can always be setbacks, and there might be a setback for Eric Fisher, but barring a setback, it looks like he's going to be back on the field in late September or early October for the Colts, and he's going to do okay at 1 year, $8.4 million. All right, so that's what we're looking for Fisher. Totally understand why Kansas City let him go. Financially, it was a smart decision. It was almost a necessary decision. Personnel-wise, do you like letting go of both starting tackles? No, but they must have felt like they could trust Lucas Niang to come back and be ready to play at that one tackle spot. And then, of course, they made the trade for Brown. So you save a boatload of money with Eric Fisher. Smart decision. Pisano was a guy here who I know a lot of you were very fond of. You know, when he came out of Villanova, he was so raw. He was such a project. He had such a long ways to go to even really deserve, if you will, to be on an NFL playing field. But he made it. By year 3 with Kansas City, he was getting a significant amount of playing time in the rotation. Not a starter. Still shouldn't be a starter, but a contributor, a guy who can come in and contribute and just be a part of the rotation, athletic enough to make the plays. And certainly by year 4, he was even more effective and even more of a contributor. So the Saints pick him up on a 2-year deal. He's the only guy here, by the way, out of this list and even this list who got more than a 1-year deal. That's the way the COVID cap is working right now. Anyway, he got a 2-year deal for $4.5 million. It's a weird contract in which they put a little bit of dead money in a void year for the 3rd year. Basically, though, his cap number, if you want to cut it in half, is $2.3 million. That's more than what Kansas City wanted to pay him. They have other defensive ends on the roster, like Okafor, like Carlton, like Michael Dana. They've got other guys on the roster who are at least as good as Pisano and maybe even better than Pisano. And so for the extra $1 million that it was going to cost you, including a 2-year contract, it just was not worth it to bring him back. Smart deal to not bring him back, to save a little bit of money. They didn't necessarily need him on the roster. He just would have been another body on the roster. He didn't offer enough to be worth that extra couple of $1 million each season. So good deal there. He made $1.4 million for you last year. He gets a little bit of a pay raise there from the Saints. Bashaud Breeland. Breeland is the one guy here out of the guys they lost. Breeland is the one guy who I think I would have liked to have bring back. And here's why. Last year, he made $2.3 million for the Chiefs. It wasn't great, but he was solid, okay? Solid defensive back. Again, here's a guy whose talent level has indicated that he could be better, but the injuries and the inconsistency again have kind of kept him from being just an absolute full-time starter in the NFL who nobody is going to take his job away. He's not that. He hasn't yet shown that he can be that. He just hasn't been consistent enough. But he's valuable enough in a league where defensive backs are hard to come by. He's effective enough to where you would want him on the roster if the price is right. And last year, at $2.3 million, the price is right. Now, he goes to the Vikings, I think it was, and he gets a one-year deal for $3 million. And, you know, that money would have had to come from somebody else, but I would have found that I think I would have liked to have brought back Breeland for $3 million. I think the price would have been right. Now, would I have needed him to start? I don't think so. I think the starting rotation at defensive back for the Chiefs is good enough to where they didn't need Breeland. But the thing is, and again, this is so important, they're going to have an injury at some point. And it's not that first injury that's going to get the Chiefs. It's going to be that second injury. If they have a second injury in the defensive backfield, especially at corner, that's the spot where it's going to start getting tricky for Kansas City. And that's the spot at which I would have very much liked to have had Breeland for $3 million. Now, I wasn't sure that Kansas City could get him for $3 million, and probably Kansas City wasn't sure that Kansas City could get him for $3 million. And maybe why, you know, in combination with the other young guys that they brought back, maybe why they didn't pursue that harder. There's no way to know how much money he would have gotten back at the time you were making these decisions. They moved on. I like the guys. I like everybody that Kansas City has in their secondary. They got a lot of young guys who can get better. It would have been nice, though, to have Breeland sitting there at $3 million. And that's the one guy I think, had I known that he was only going to cost $3 million this season, I would have liked to have had back. Now, in spite of the COVID cap, I really kind of sort of thought he might get a 2-year deal at $4 or $5 million. That didn't happen. He ends up getting the 1 year, $3 million, be that as it may. Wilson's a guy here. He only signs a 1-year deal for $2 million. Wilson's another guy here who was making too much money, came from the Cowboys, making too much money. $5 million, $5.4 million last year. I forget what he was the year before. I think it was somewhere in the same ballpark. And not a bad player, and not a guy that you hate being on your team, but certainly not the guy you want being your starter, and certainly not the guy you want to be paying $5.4 million to. Okay, so they made the right decision here by letting him walk. They've got younger guys at linebacker. They get cheaper at linebacker. I think they're getting better at linebacker, and they're letting Wilson go. And that just, it shows again, these free agent decisions here with Watkins and with Wilson, it shows again that sometimes the best deals in free agency are the ones that you just don't even make. When you tie up a lot of money into certain players and they either don't perform or they get injured and they're out for a season or parts of 2 seasons, you have all that money tied up in those players, and it's just wasted money. And so the cap space here, Kansas City did the right thing here by letting go of Wilson. They did the right thing here by not re-signing Watkins. And they did the right thing here by letting go of Fasano, even though it would have only cost him $1 million or $2 million. He just wasn't good enough to be bringing back for that amount of money. Damian Williams is a guy who I would have loved to have had back, but his cap hit was going to be 2.8. So even though I would have loved to have had him back, I love him there at running back. I think Kansas City made the right choice here by not pulling him back in at $2.8 million. He re-signs somewhere else, maybe the Bears, I can't remember, $1.1 million, 1-year deal. Kansas City again saves the money there. They didn't have to have him at running back. It just would have been fun to have had a guy there with his big play potential back there at running back number 3 or running back number 4. But you don't really want to pay $2.8 million for that. If they could have got him at the $1.1 million mark, absolutely would have had that, but he's already gone. Mike Pennell is a guy who I really like at defensive tackle. It kind of surprises me that Mike Pennell continues to bounce around from team to team. I really like him. I think Pennell is a guy who really could be getting 600, 700 snaps a season in the NFL, especially at these prices, $1.1 million. He continues to bounce around, but Kansas City didn't need him. They are loaded at defensive tackle. They have too many defensive tackles. They have so many defensive tackles that they're splitting them off the defensive end because of the shortage of manpower at defensive end. So no need to bring back Mike Pennell, even though he's very cheap. Deion Yelder, $920,000. Good decision to let him go. Again, Yelder would just been another body at tight end, not producing anything there that you couldn't replace with. And I like what they did by bringing in Noah Gray. And Noah Gray, I think, is going to be very effective underneath at the tight end position for Kansas City. Okay, we covered a lot there, and some of that I know is not the most fascinating stuff, but it's important to see what they did here with Watkins. Probably should never have signed that contract in the first place. Good deal to just let him go. You have plenty of other guys there at receiver. It's important to note the Breeland decision. If I know they could have gotten him at $3 million, probably would have gotten him at that price, but they didn't. And then again, right here with Remmers and Sorensen and Okafor, those are the kinds of guys who it's really important to bring back because it affects your depth so much, and that's really what we're looking at. All right, thank you so much. That's it. See you next time. Bye.